I'm very excited about tonight. Whitley Strieber was born in San Antonio, Texas in 1945. After a brief stint in advertising, he turned his attention to fiction, and he authored a series of very, very popular horror novels, including The Wolfen and The Hunger, both of which were turned into blockbuster Hollywood films. Whitley was on the map as a major new voice in the literary circle and in horror fiction. Famously, on the night of December 26, 1985, in his remote cabin in the woods in upstate New York, where he was with his wife and son, Whitley had a life-changing experience. He was abruptly awakened by a strange buzzing sound, then became aware of small figures in his bedroom with thin limbs and large, dark eyes. He recalled floating out of his bed and being transported to an unknown location where he experienced a series of intrusive procedures, including what felt like medical examinations and telepathic communication. He was paralyzed and unable to resist, and yet sensed a deep emotional intensity from these beings telepathically. Eventually, Whitley regained consciousness back in his bed, in his cabin, with missing time and fragmented memories. And his life was changed forever. Now, what I've just described is what we now know to be a very classic abduction experience depicted in countless books and movies and TV shows and comics and cartoons. And if this sort of encounter is familiar to us now, that is because of Whitley. At the time, there was no context for this experience. Whitley entered a period of incredible confusion and self-doubt and shame and secrecy. He didn't know where to put this. There was no framework for it at all. And it was finally when his wife Anne suggested that he write about his experience that Communion was born. And when this cover hit the stands, everything changed. Legions of other closet experiencers found themselves acknowledged for the first time. And the story of this author and his aliens became all the rage. Communion was on every news broadcast, every magazine. It was the topic of every dinner conversation. But this was not necessarily the type of notoriety that a man in Whitley's position would benefit from. Now, despite the book becoming a bestseller, Whitley's reputation in the literary community was under assault. Now, what we now know is that our government has been aware of the existence of non-human intelligences since the Roswell crash of 1947, and their primary method of suppressing this information is to ensure that anyone who speaks out about it publicly is met with public humiliation and ridicule. This is systemic, it's deliberate, it's by design. And it's been very effective. And it's what happened to Whitley. In the public sphere, he became the butt of many jokes, and in the literary sphere, he couldn't get arrested. But he stood by the truth of his experience, and he continued writing about the visitors, as he came to call them, with numerous other books, examining the presence in his life, the philosophical, ontological implications, relentlessly, and with no regard for the cost, which was great. And eventually, things began to change. Now, today, we are living through what appears to potentially be the first stages of disclosure. And we take for granted the ways in which Whitley's work has laid the groundwork for our collective understanding of this phenomenon and how it works. And for that, Whitley is a hero. Whitley is also a personal hero to me. Tonight is about Whitley, it's not about me, but I do want to just briefly touch on what Whitley's work has meant to me personally. I am a writer and a filmmaker, also known for works of horror. And like Whitley, some number of years ago, I had a series of life-changing paranormal experiences that completely turned my reality inside out. And I too went into a period of secrecy and shame. But I eventually decided to go public with my experiences because I felt I owed it to others like me who may also be living with these secrets. Now, my story has been met with warmth and curiosity and interest in the creative and Hollywood community. But this would not have been possible without Whitley having paved the way for me and people like me. And for that, I am eternally grateful. Tonight we're going to focus on an aspect of Whitley's life that is not often made the subject, and that is his life as an artist, as a writer. Now, it's inextricably all interwoven with his experiences with the visitors, so don't worry, we're going to talk about aliens. But we thought this might be an interesting way into the conversation. Many experiencers are creatives, and many creatives are experiencers. For those of you in the room who are creatives, who aren't experiencers, what I will say to you is, not yet. Or maybe you are and you don't know it. The lines between fiction, reality, fantasy, science fiction, they're getting blurry as our world begins to change. The questions of where artists draw inspiration and the act of creation itself being perhaps a mystical or supernatural act is becoming more and more relevant in our society. And in Whitley's case, the source of his inspiration is quite literally otherworldly. So we're going to talk about that and many other aspects of his work in tonight's conversation. So please welcome to the stage Whitley Strieber.
This open before I start.
Oh yeah, good idea, good idea. Hi, Whitley.
Hi. Can everyone, yeah, we're on. You've become very theoretical because now I can't see you. It's too bright. Okay, but that's okay. I know you're out there. Okay, get started.
I just wanted you to have a moment. That's okay. You have often described your own life as being somewhat enigmatic to you, and you have described being suspicious of your own memory at times.
Oh yeah, I don't think I know my life. In fact, over the course of this conversation, it will be quite clear that I do not know my life. But that doesn't mean that that the experience of life I have is invalid. I think the ambiguity of it is fundamentally validating, because when we all look into our own lives, we discover that there is a level of ambiguity in memory. Memory is just not stable. And any neurologist will tell you that memory is not stable. There have been experiments when they have been able to cause people to come to believe that they committed crimes that they absolutely did not commit by manipulating their memory. And so, and yet I'm in a situation where I have had experiences that demand accuracy of memory. And in some cases, I have been very unwilling to say this is what happened. But in other parts of it, in other cases, yes. For example, in my experience on December the 26th, 1985, a needle was stuck into the side of my head. It was one of the things that was done to me. And there was a little mark, and a needle mark, in fact, that was there for a few days afterwards. About a year ago, a doctor who, now there are doctors around who specialize in, there's more analysis of the brains, for example, of people who have had this experience than before. And they found out that certain linkages in my brain are completely unique. Now, that says to me that was something was done to me that day, that night. So, in other words, the needle must have happened. And there's an implant in my left ear, which is here right now, which it's real. The people, I remember when it was put in, and that actually physically happened. And it's right there. I can touch it anytime I want to remind me of this. So that's where I am with memory. I refuse to defend it, but I am learning to trust it more than I used to.
Now, in point of fact, you were not made aware of the presence of the visitors in your life until that night.
No, not at all.
26th, yeah. So what I'm interested in, and I think our way into this conversation tonight is, I'm curious about the ways that there may have been some dormant awareness of the visitors in your life that may have subtly presented itself to you, and perhaps even a prognostication of specific events that may have shown up as you were going through the motions of what any young writer goes through, finding your voice, discovering what interests you, allowing ideas to enter your mind from wherever the hell they come from.
They come from, and, yeah.
Yeah, because for the someone who has not had your experience, we're all navel gazers, us artists, and we go back and we go, oh, I think it was that time that my mother abandoned me at the ballpark, and that's why I keep writing. But for you, it's a very different phenomenon that we're exploring.
Well, first, something happened to me when I was a little boy. I have no direct memory of it myself. I do, however, have, there's certain things about it I remember. I was taken to Randolph Air Force Base as a little boy, and something happened there so disturbing. I went every Thursday night from August through October of 1952, that my immune system collapsed, and I ended up in Brooke General Hospital in San Antonio, military hospital, a 7-year-old boy whose family was not in the military, in a military hospital, being given shots of gamma globulin because I had no immune system. And I was a little tiny guy, of course, I remember the needles as being like huge, but I was tiny. I was a little boy, and sometimes when the doctors would give me these shots, it would go through my arm and drip down my chest. That you don't forget. But what happened? Interestingly enough, a man who today is, to this day, is my closest friend in the world, remembers the same thing. He remembers he was 9 and I was 7 when this happened. He was in the room when some Air Force people, who we all knew them, and they weren't, our parents did, I didn't, but our parents knew them. Came in and recruited him for this program. And when the parents were told that it involved placing the child in something called a Skinner box in order to induce accelerated learning, they said no. My parents said yes. And I ended up out of school in October and isolated first at the hospital and then at home until January. And after my mother passed away, we discovered that she had kept the report card with every report period neatly written in the nun's hand, absent due to illness, all of her life. And my sister said, well, we can't let this, we can't keep this. And she took it and destroyed it. It's too bad. Anyway, so that was there. It was all there when I started to write. I wanted to be a writer. I was very fortunate to meet my wife, Anne, who she asked me on our first date, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm an advertising guy, but I want to be a writer. And so Anne's attitude was, okay, this is what he wants, I'm going to make it happen. She went back to school and got a master's in English literature so she could be my editor. And we became a partnership, a profound, deep partnership. Communion wouldn't exist except for Anne. The title of that book is Anne's title for it. And it turns out to be the most fundamental truth about the whole experience of contact, and it's just now beginning to emerge. But let's go back to the beginning, the first book, The Wolfen. Yeah. Okay, now, before we started, we were struggling to find something that I think is going to interest you a lot. This book was written in 1976 and 1977 and published, I guess I finished it in 1978. It was published shortly thereafter. It was my first published novel. Like all writers, I have plenty of unpublished novels lying around, and they're all brilliant, and the publishers were all fools, but that's their problem, not mine. Okay, The Wolfen is about creatures who are gray. They have great big eyes. They're wolves. They are predators. They are as intelligent as we are, and they are equipped with senses that make it unnecessary for them to have technology. Their vision is extraordinary. Their sense of smell is extraordinary. Their ears are extraordinary. So, they're already a lot like the Greys. But this gets even stranger. Let me read you a passage from The Wolfen. Now, the character in this passage is looking at a 16th century print of a werewolf. And he says, he was seeing the werewolf close up, face to face. This would be a reliable rendition of the features. Even in this 380-year-old engraving, he could see the savagery, the sheer voraciousness of the creature. The eyes stared out at him like something from a nightmare, or are they really our friends? We'll find out. And they were from a nightmare. His mind was racing now as he remembered an incident that had occurred when he was no more than 6 or 7. They were in the Catskills, spending their summer near New Paltz in upstate New York. He was asleep in his ground floor bedroom. Something awakened him. Moonlight was streaming in the open window, and a monstrous animal was leaning in, poking its muzzle toward him, the face clear in the moonlight. That was written before the communion experience. I knew the communion experience happened a few miles from New Paltz, New York. That very experience of someone peering in the window in a ground floor bedroom happened to my own son years later. So what is really going on here? How does this weave work? And you go from the Wolfen to the hunger. And you have the Greys, which are the Wolfen, and then the blondes, which are another part of this mythology. Blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful people who have perhaps some people think of them as wonderful, and others see a more sinister side to them. The Miriam in the hunger reflects the timelessness of these beings. And she is clearly an interpretation of them that I created at that time. Do you want to ask further questions? Because I can talk all night.
No, keep going.
Because if something comes up, please ask.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but yeah.
Okay.
Go going.
Okay, then let's move on.
Should I just take a seat down there?
What? I didn't hear you.
I was joking. I said
Okay.
I'll go take a seat.
All right.
So how you said just now? What is going on?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Okay. Well, since you asked, let's go back to this strange weave that's been in my life, and we'll go back a little further, and then we're going to come back to the books. Let's go back to meeting Anne, who is an enormous, towering part of this whole experience. Anne was a sort of orphan from Michigan. When I met her, we met through not computer, there were no computers then, but through a matchmaking app, a matchmaking ad that I read happened to see in the Village Voice, and so did she, as it turned out. I had just moved from London to New York. My father was very much against the Vietnam War, and he was friendly enough with Lyndon Johnson to where Johnson, before going to Washington on his full term, had said to Dad and to my uncle, who was also in the Democratic Party in Texas, "I will bring the boys home." Then he met Robert McNamara, and 50,000 boys didn't come home because of that. Dad was really upset about this, and he sent me to Europe rather than have me risk getting into the war, and I did what I was told. And I was glad, frankly, because I was not in favor of the Vietnam War at all. I came back from London wanting to meet girls, and I'd met a few girls in England, but I was a young boy, and I wanted girls in my life. And so I got into the advertising business, largely because it started with an A, and I was in Benton and Bowles advertising because NW Ayer didn't hire me. And so I wasn't really terribly interested in what I was doing. I wanted to be a writer. I was obsessed with it, already writing novels. And I saw this ad, and I went to singles bars, and I'm not a liar. I have a lot of trouble with that. And all the other guys at the singles bars were lawyers, airline pilots, doctors, you name it. I was a media planner, which is like the lowest level person in the advertising business, and I'm not going to say I'm anything else. I think they were all media planners too, but that's another story. In any case, I got nowhere in that. So I decided I'll answer this ad. And I got a list of names, oddly enough, four or five names. Oddly enough, most of them were the last names were fish, like trout and salmon and stuff, and I thought, could it be that these are not real and that Maddox is the only real one? So I called one of the fish, and she was real, but she wasn't. We didn't hit it off. So I thought, well, I won't try any more of the fish. I'm going to try the Maddox and see what happens. So I go to meet her. She's in a company not far from the advertising agency I was working in. I go and I walk in, and there's this wonderful girl sitting at the reception. She's big brown eyes. I mean, she was very striking. And I thought, oh God, if only Anne Maddox looks like this girl, I'll be so relieved. And I said, I'm here to see Anne Maddox. She says, I'm Anne. I thought, aha. We were not apart again for more than 2 weeks for the next 45 years. I knew what I had right away. Because not only was she an extraordinarily beautiful woman, she was also brilliant. And that the thing we had both signed up for was called Mind Mates, and you got like 10 or 12 essays. It was very challenging, because in my dating life, I had figured out I was a smart guy. And I thought, I need a woman, a wife, a girl who is smarter than me, preferably, or at least as smart, or we're not going to be happy. I found one who was a lot smarter than I was. And that was, thank God, because I would never have succeeded in life if I hadn't had that genius behind me figuring things out. So as soon as we got together, weird stuff began to happen. This other world immediately came into our lives in ways that at the time seemed sort of funny, and not particularly, a little scary sometimes. Example. We lived on West 55th Street in Manhattan, and we'd walk back and forth to Fifth Avenue, which was filled at the time with bookshops. Doubleday's and Scribner's and Brentano's were all there. And we both loved books, and we were readers, and we would go after work, we'd have our dinner, and then go explore the bookstores. And on the way on 55th Street between Broadway and 7th, there was a little storefront, which was just a little sort of bay window storefront. And in this storefront, from time to time, there would be a girl sitting in a chair with a curtain behind her, and in a rather provocative pose with no sign or anything. And we used to laughingly call it the whore store, because that's what we thought it was. One night, we're coming back from Doubleday's, and something's going on in the whore store. The chair's on its side, the curtain's flapping back and forth, and you can see this guy in a brown suit trying to get out from behind the curtain, and little dark blue dwarfs are coming out and grabbing him and pulling him back behind the curtain. We watch this for a couple seconds, and we say, we better call the police. But, there's no cell phones. We had to go home. So we go running home to call the police, and then I'm starting to call the police, and Ann says, wait a minute, what are you going to say? And I think to myself, if I say that, they're not going to that horse store, they're coming here because they're going to think we're on drugs. And so we didn't call the police. And then the horse store was just empty from then on. No one, it was never populated again. But then, years later, who shows up in my life with these grays, but the same little blue guys I saw in the horse store? So, wow, what in the world is happening here? This is a life that is not even near the rails. It's way off the rails. It's down in the deep woods somewhere. And Ann made the connection. She said, that sounds like the little dwarfs that were in the horse store. You figure it out, okay? Because I'm just telling you what happened. I'm not telling you how. I'm not going to explain it because I can't. Any other questions?
Were there other examples of these characters from your future life appearing in your earlier life?
Well, there were some odd events and odd experiences, but I don't think they ended up in my books. Well, I'll give you an example of one that was particularly odd. We lived on the top floor of 347 West 55th Street, the 8th floor, and in those days, everything had an incinerator. So this was before any attempt to clean up the atmosphere. And it was an H-shaped building with apartments on each H, and then apartments across the front, and then a stairwell and an elevator in the middle. And we were on one end, and the incinerator was on the other. At night, I would take the garbage out and take it and put it in the incinerator, drop it down the chute. One night I'm walking along and I hear this whick, whick, whick on the floor below, this funny noise. And I drop my stuff in the incinerator and I listen, I hear whick, whick. What the heck could that be? So I decide I'll go down the central stairwell and see. Then I saw, all right, I go down the central stairwell, and what appears to be a corpse with its teeth its lips all withered back and its teeth showing like it's becoming skeletonized, wearing a pair of briefs only. And the scraping noise is because it's akimbo with its legs spread out, and in order to move, it's thrusting its pelvis forward and sliding along the floor, and that's what the scraping sound is. And I see this and I think, this can't be good. And sure enough, as soon as it sees me, it starts scraping along real fast. It's coming toward me. I run to the end of the hall and I hear it back there. It's coming after me. I run up the stairs, I close the door, I lock it, and thud, thud, thud on the door, thud, thud, thud. Ann says, "What's going on?" I say, "I'm not sure." And so then we discover that the apartment immediately below ours is boarded up. It's plywooded up. The windows are all plywooded up, boarded up. And I decide I'm going to call the landlord because, I'm a normal person. This is not something that I would expect to happen. And I'm concerned about my wife's safety, et cetera, and all that sort of stuff. So I call the guy, the manager. He was not the landlord, he was the manager. And the 5 words don't come out of my mouth until he yells out, "The living corpse." I said, "Yeah, that's what it looked like." He said, "Look, I can't do a damn thing about it. I've been down to rent control. They laugh at me. You go down and tell them about it and see if you can get him evicted." I said, "Well, what is he?" He said, "We don't know." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He pays his rent." And I said, did he do anything? Did he attack you? I said, no. He chased me. He said, he chases everybody, but he's never done anything to anybody. So I talked to a few of the other longtime tenants, and they all were aware of the living corpse. And one of them says to me, did you get chased by him? And I said, "Yeah, join the club," she says. Anyway, a few months later, suddenly I noticed that the apartment is all opened up and it's just bare floors. It obviously hasn't been cleaned, nothing in there, and the door's wide open. There are workmen there and the plywood's gone. So I call the managing agent and I say, "Did the living corpse move out?" And he said, "That could be what happened. Anyway, he's gone." End of story. So, and we just laughed it off. We were just a couple of kids laughing it off. And here's another thing. One afternoon, we would ride our bikes down to the village. We would do very specific things. We would go to the 8th Street bookshop and just gorge on all of the left-wing books of that era that we loved, and all the poetry and stuff that you couldn't get at Doubleday's was down there. That was where we could get things like you can get at City Lights. It was at the 8th Street bookshop in Manhattan. So we'd go there, then we'd go have a hamburger or something, then we'd go to Lilac Candies and McNulty Coffee on Christopher Street and ride back home with our booty. And it was an absolutely wonderful time, and I'm going to forget why I started this story, darn it. It's got there's good.
Well, I was asking about other times that.
Oh yeah, okay. And one time we were riding back, and all of a sudden, this guy, in classic overcoat deal, opens his overcoat to Anne and exposes himself. And of course, I get outraged, and I'm going after him. But then another guy comes around the corner and does the same thing. And so suddenly we're dealing with 3 or 4 flashers, all in overcoats, all coming around onto 7th Avenue and flashing Anne. And Anne is amused. She's laughing. And, because she was not the type of, you're not going to touch Anne with flashing. She's not going to be screaming or anything. She's going to laugh in your face. So we got home, and again, we just sort of, it just doesn't happen that way, though. There are no flashers conventions. And so then, later that afternoon, we're sitting there, we've been listening to music, the stereo is still on, but it's just on. In other words, there's no music playing, when all of a sudden, this voice talks out of the stereo and says, "Hi, Whitley," in a male voice. And I think, that's peculiar. And I say, "Hi." And we have a brief conversation of, "How are you?" And "I'm fine," and so forth. I said, "Who are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm a friend of yours." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I know a lot about you." I said, "What?" He said, "Well, I know you're married now, and you've been married for a while, and you're very happy." And the conversation went on for a couple of minutes, not more than a couple of minutes. It ends with, and he says, "And I know something else about you." And I say, "What?" In silence. Never spoke again. That's the end. So we're incensed. We call the Federal Communications Commission. In those days, it was a much smaller world. And, when a member of the public called the FCC, he did not get AI, he got a person. And so I tell this guy what happened. And he said, "Well, it's a receiver, so it can receive signals. It must have been a passing cab driver whose radio was incorrectly tuned." I said, "Well, he seemed to know me." He said, "No, you said, yeah, he knew my name." This guy says, "Well, do you know any cab drivers?" I said, "No, I don't know any cab drivers. I mean, I do, but not by name." And that's the end of that story. So it was a life that was being lived on the edge, but we did not know that.
Yeah. High strangeness is what we call it.
High strangeness, but we were just basically a couple of kids who we met, we had lunch, we went to a movie together, we came back to my apartment. A friend was staying with me. We said hello to the friend. We went into the bedroom, closed the door, and that was it. That was it. And that was all we cared about. We had a little love nest, and we were having an absolute blast in our love nest. And to hell with the weird stuff. We didn't care about it. We just laughed it off. Thank you.
Do you believe in reincarnation?
Do I believe in reincarnation? If reincarnation is real, then what did I do to deserve this? No, the lady on the cover of Communion said to me at one of the darkest moments of my experience, "You're the luckiest of the lucky." Now, all of these years later, when these people are the best friends I've got, or could ever imagine having, I know she was right. But I have always thought that maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was because of Anne, that I had met Anne, that she said that. Jeff Kripal, my co-author of Supernatural and one of the most brilliant people in this field, he's a professor of religious studies at Rice University and the creator of the Archives of the Impossible and the author of many books like Superhumanities, and he's a genius. He said that he thought Anne and the lady on the cover of Communion were in some way the same being. That there's a connection between us and them that we don't fully understand. That they're not aliens from another planet. It's better, it's easier and more true perhaps, not easier, but more true, to think of them as aliens from within reality, aliens in a sense from within us and within the world, who live in a way in reality that is different from ours. And Annie used to call them inward beings. And I think that might be closer to the truth that, you know, when the flying saucers, and I have pleaded with the Greys, do land on the White House lawn. Please, that would be the perfect beginning to a whole new kind of relationship with you. I can hardly imagine what would happen to the White House if that occurred. Maybe it will, because they do have a sense of humor. Yeah, go ahead. Next question.
Well, why was that your answer to my reincarnation question?
I am a little weirded out by the question. It's kind of unexpected. And
I know. Well, let me tell you why I'm asking.
Yeah, please do.
Do you believe it's possible you were dispatched in this life?
I was dispatched into this life.
That in this life you were dispatched with a purpose?
When you say dispatched, exactly what do you mean?
Well, if you are disseminating information.
Yes.
And I know that you have wondered about your role.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people in the intelligence community think of me as this kind of a typhoid Mary. And, although they're getting used to me slowly but surely, they're just beginning to get used to the idea that they've got a lot of people on their side who are having very similar experiences. So, but that's going to take time. I have some past life memories that are probably, if that exists, then these memories are probably real, because they're very vivid and they came out of nowhere. But there are three of them. Two of them took place in ancient Rome, and very vivid and detailed. And unfortunately, they're both about dying. One of them is about dying in a chariot race, and the other one is about dying in the Colosseum, which is a place where a lot of people did die. And then there's one about dying in World War I in an airplane as a young German boy flying a fighter. And if what I've read about past life memories is that the ones that persist tend to be the ones that had the most intense deaths. So, yeah, maybe so. But there's nothing in these memories that would suggest that I came into this life from some kind of preparation. I do remember going into my mother's womb, which is a memory I've had all my life, and not all my life, but I guess all my life. I didn't really think about it much until I was a teenager, and then when I mentioned it to friends, they all acted like I was crazy. And I did not know other people did not remember this. And I remember it very well.
You remember going into your
Yeah,
memory?
absolutely.
Could you describe that memory?
Yeah, sure. It's one of the most beautiful memories in my life. They lived in a house in Texas and in San Antonio, and I was born in June. And this must have been in May, probably. I was, and I remember coming out of this light and down and seeing the trees below me and going down among the trees and feeling a tremendous sense of this is a secret, and hearing the cicadas ratcheting in the trees as I went, and then to a window, and in the top of the window, and there was this woman sleeping on a bed with a great big belly, and it was a warm afternoon, and I felt a love that was not particularly for her, but it was just this very profound sense of peace. And I went down into this woman, and suddenly there was a great deal of noise, a tremendous sloshing and going on, and then a dialogue between me and her began. And that dialogue lasted, still goes on, I guess. And that's the memory of going into the womb. And as I say, was amazed when I discovered other people didn't have that memory. It's just an ordinary part of my life, that memory. Yeah.
You once said something in an interview that I thought was so profound, and you were describing your current interactions with Anne.
Yeah.
After her passing, and you said that when she first came back to you, she said something along the lines of, "I'm not Anne anymore,
but I'll always be Anne for you."
Be Anne for you. Yeah.
Yes.
She's so beautiful.
Oh man, Anne was, as I say, she was just an ordinary kid. But that's an extraordinary thing to be. And all of you, never let you forget that, because you think of yourself as much less than you actually are. Every single one of us is in that boat. Anne she had a brain bleed in 2004, and she recovered from it completely. But then in 2013, turned out she had developed a brain tumor. And they told us she had 6 months to live. And of course, I went all out. I learned about how to control these things with cannabis and all sorts of stuff. And we did really well. We did 2 years when they expected it just a few months. And Annie never lost any, she never had any pain. She never lost her cognitive abilities or anything like that. In January of 2015, she had a series of strokes and was partly paralyzed now on her right side. And she began to ask me to memorize a poem called Song of the Wandering Aengus by W.B. Yeats. And I thought, that's a strange thing to do, and I just ignored it. And then she said a few days later, "Have you memorized the poem?" I said, "What poem?" She said, "Song of the Wandering Aengus. I asked you to memorize that." And I said, "I haven't." And she burst into tears. And so I did memorize it. I will never forget it. I went out to the hazelwood because a fire was in my head, and cut and peeled a hazel wand and hooked a berry to a thread. When white moths were on the wing and the moth-like stars were flickering out, I dropped the berry in a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I laid it on the floor and went to blow the fire aflame, something rustled on the floor and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and faded through the brightening air. I will follow her in hollow lands and hilly lands. I will seek her in hollow lands and hilly lands, and find where she has gone, and kiss her lips, and take her hands, and walk with her in long dappled grass, and pluck till time and times are done, the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. Annie, don't be pissed off at me because I flubbed it up a little bit. When white moths were on the wing and the moth-like stars were flickering out. After Annie passed away, I started to do things like I went to conferences and stuff. I didn't want to stay in the house. I was grief-stricken because she was a huge, huge influence in my life, obviously. And struggling. I was struggling a lot. And at one of the conferences, I have cameras in my house, of course, because that's to keep the visitors out. Actually, no. They've explained to me why I can't get a picture of them. They said, one image that's proven before the time is right will be very destructive. So I know that those cameras are not going to get, but they get a lot of cool stuff anyway. I've got lots of interesting stuff. In any case, I was at a conference, and one of the cameras started alarming that there was movement. And I thought, oh God, that's all I need. And I turn on the app and look in, and there's this moth flying back and forth in front of the camera. And I think, what the heck? And someone in the conference looks at it and says, Whitley, that's no ordinary moth. I said, what do you mean? It looks like a moth to me. She said, no, it doesn't. Moths don't just fly back and forth like that in the middle of the day in front of a camera. It's telling you something, and you better listen because it's important. It's wonderful people at these conferences. It's full of psychics and stuff, and it's such a cool thing to do, to go to them. I love them. In any case, she was right, because the moth began to appear in many different situations that were so purposeful that, and it finally, in Christmas of 2016, I was with my son, and I said to him, I was telling him about the moth appearances, and I said, I think this moth, I think it's from the poem, and it's an avatar. Anne has created an avatar in this life, in this world, the first person to ever consciously create an avatar before she died. That's the white moth. And the camera alarmed, and there was the moth flying back and forth in front of the camera. We were in San Diego, and my apartment's in Santa Monica, and I thought to myself, I said, Mom's just given us a Christmas present. And but before then, I had zeroed in on this because I remembered that Anne's favorite short story of mine is about an elderly lady who is discovering that she's died, and it's called The White Moths. So
It's called The White Moth.
The White Moths, yeah. This is all in the book, The Afterlife Revolution, that I wrote when I was in close contact with Anne. But everybody moves on and everything changes. Anne is not as intimately in my life now as she was then. And, this is nature. It should be like this. I've been told by two psychics that she has been reborn, and she's been reincarnated, and they both told me they don't know each other at all, and I've never introduced them. They're not in the same city, and they have no connection whatsoever. They both described the same person, the same child. And I'm in a situation where I know the family that child is now 6 years old in. So I know this is probably Anne, this child. And every time this little guy sees me, he just is so happy, and we have such a good time together. And it's a wonderful way to live. What a blessing.
You answered my reincarnation question.
Well, I don't know anything about reincarnation.
You're describing life, a Fellini-esque life.
Yes.
That feels like it has almost like a circus-like quality to it. And there are synchronicities everywhere. For example, one I don't know that you even caught, which is the Yeats poem, harkens back to the fish.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's
a woman born of fish. Yeah.
This is why I love him so much. We haven't known each other for very long, but as soon as I met him, I knew this is a cool guy. So no one has ever said that before, but you're right, and that's really food for thought. Yeah. The beauty of this whole experience is if you pin it down, it slips out from under. and it goes a little somewhere else. It's not meant to be pinned down. You know, Annie used to say, the human species is too young to have beliefs. What we need are good questions. And boy, is that ever true. If you can get past the stone of beliefs that we all carry on our backs, you're so free. Because it turns out that when you're past that obstacle, when you've dropped that obstacle finally, you're a hyperdimensional being and you didn't even know it. They were holding you down. She had a near-death experience that she wrote about in her diary on our website. And she said that Annie we're humble people. I mean, we're not going to be in the palaces for sure. So in her near-death experience, there was no glorious light or anything. She was in what looked to her like a big bus station. And everyone was carrying bags. And a voice said to her, "You can go on if you wish." This is when she had her brain bleed. Or you can stay and go back. And she decided to come back. She said to me, "I came back because I'm not finished with you." And the burdens that they carried are the beliefs that kept them, weighed them down in life, and they can't let go of them. They can't let go of them. We got to let go of them in this life before we pass on and become unable to make the kinds of changes that we are blessed with in this sacred experience that we're having now together. So find your questions. I challenge you to do that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that's a great segue into it. Let's talk about what's happening now.
Now, okay.
Because it feels like something's happening now, does it not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does. These are wild times, boy. They're all a lot of the Jake Barber. Yeah, Jake Barber has come out. Lou Elizondo has come out. I know Lou a little bit. He's a wonderful man, and I don't know Jake yet, but we have mutual friends, and we're sort of circling each other. Hopefully, he'll come.
Explain who that is for people
Yeah,
who don't
Jake
know.
Barber is a special Army Special Forces operator who retrieved crashed UFOs. And I've known about these retrievals for a long time, and I've known about the bodies at Fort Detrick for a long time. And my new book called The Fourth Mind is just out in Kindle and paperback, and it's going to be out on an audiobook. I read the audiobook, and it should be out in about a week, and hardcover also probably in about a week. And it goes into these bodies in great detail, but because I can do that now, and there's no sense in hiding anything. Anyway, these guys are coming out with their experiences. Jake Barber was on Russ Coulthart's show on News Nation, and in the interview, he said a very interesting thing. He said that as he was attempting to retrieve one of these crashed devices, something came out of it and came into him. It was a beautiful feminine energy that possessed him, and it's still with him, and he's very, very glad it's there. And of course, you know what's changing. We're moving from Pisces to Aquarius, and what possessed him was the feminine essence of the future. And he's glad of this, and I'm very glad he is. As here's this tough special forces operator, the toughest of the tough, and he has found a feminine energy that he accepts fully as part of himself. That's the beginning of communion. Possession is not something that's ever going to last, because eventually the soul that's possessed is going to want to shake that off. Annie understood that very well, and that's why she understood how to change that sense of being penetrated into communion. And that will happen with Jake. And all of us, ultimately, we're headed for communion. Every single one of us. And, you know, she was such a, she used to say, I asked her once about compassion. I said, there's so many people in the world, and everyone is, you know, people are suffering, and what can you do about it? And she said, Whitley, you have to be conscious of this, because each of us is all we have. You take that to heart, and you walk down the street, and people you don't even notice, you just look right past usually, you say to that person is all they have. They come to life. Everyone does. I'm looking out at you right now through those eyes that she gave me. That feminine energy that I also, just like Jake, have welcomed into my being. That extraordinary energy that is the new energy of a new humankind coming. That's contact. That's disclosure. And you know, it's going to be quite extraordinary if all, never say the Greys don't have a sense of humor, because I have a feeling that they're going to end up coming to us through the medium of Donald Trump. Because they love nominative determinism, and look at his name. As soon as I saw him appear on the political scene, I thought, holy moly, he's going to be a big deal, and the Greys are coming, because they're not going to miss that name. The Trump card. It's funny, you can laugh. It's perfectly funny. It's funny as hell. You know, if this universe wasn't funny, God would have made a very major mistake. You know what Meister Eckhart said about this place? He said, God laughs and plays. That's the title of one of his sermons. Annie loved that. She said, that's it. God laughs and plays. When I talk about this with people on your level, I'm always going to talk about Annie, because Annie was someone that we are all very lucky came through the world, however briefly. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about Trump, but you already covered that one.
I don't want to talk about politics.
Yeah, okay.
I'm easily scared.
Let's I want to talk about something that I have an incredible amount of curiosity about, and it's you told me that you arise every morning at
Yes.
an hour of 3 a.m. and you meditate.
Yes,
and
I do.
You commune with the visitors.
Yes.
And you collaborate.
We collaborate.
On your
That's
books.
right. On the books.
I want to know everything about this.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes. I can cover it in that. Okay, this collaboration is very complex, and it's not just with the Greys, it's with us, because in that level of reality, there aren't any distinctions about us versus them. It's souls and other elements and other entities. It's different energies, and there are many, many of them, and many of them are human, have been here and done this, and been other places and done other things. So when I'm communing at that hour, it's not just with the Greys. It's very important to understand that. Although they are masters of this, and they are certainly the lead players. Okay, in May of 1989, I was wide awake, and when two people ended up getting into the house of the cabin in upstate New York, they ended up putting this object in my ear, this little implant.
People?
Two people, human beings, absolutely.
Human beings?
A man and a woman, yeah, absolutely. there may have been something else there. I've never been sure, but behind them. But here's what happened. It's a May night. The windows are open in the bedroom. Behind in the back windows is a swimming pool. In the front is a shale driveway. And out on the driveway, farther out on the driveway, is a big, heavy gate. All of a sudden, I hear the crunching of gravel in the driveway. A vehicle is there. There are no lights. Obviously not good news. It's 11 o'clock at night. They've gotten past the gate. They don't have their lights on. We're in trouble. I have a bank of light switches beside the bed, which I can flip on and completely flood the whole place with light outside. I start to do that, and as I turn, I see a man and a woman standing at near the foot of the bed. And I see beyond them that the LED on the alarm system is still red. It's not tripped. So I'm not going for the lights anymore. The hell with the lights. I'm going for the shotgun under the bed. I'm from Texas, and I have to tell you, that's just a natural thing that I would have. And I also know how to use them. So in any case, I'm going for the shotgun, and they come forward. The next thing I know, I'm lying on my right side. It's all black. I can't move a muscle. My head is being pushed down in waves into the pillow, and the woman's voice is speaking to me very gently. This goes on for a short time. Then it stops. There's a flash of light. There's crashing in the woods. When I realized that they were there, a voice in the backyard, a male voice, said very quietly, "Condition red." And so it looked to me, it sounded like a human operation. Next morning, they leave, and there's a crashing in the woods. I jump up, I get the pistol, not the shotgun, and run it through the house. There's no breach anywhere, so I therefore assume I don't know what to think, and I end up sitting on the side of the bed for a while and then sleeping very fitfully for the rest of the night, thinking I don't know what happened. Was it a dream or a nightmare or a lucid dream? I just am mystified. Next morning, we discover the garage door is wide open, even though the alarm system is still running. And from that, we realize that the intrusion was real. A few days later, the ear starts to hurt. Annie says from the beginning, do not get it taken out. Do not get it taken out. And I say, I don't want to be tracked. She said, nobody cares whether or not anything, your life is so fantastically uninteresting in terms of tracking. Nobody's going to care that you go down to get a newspaper, or go out to buy a six-pack of beer every once in a while. No one cares. So if they are tracking you, they're going to be finished with you in a week. So I said, okay, you've made your point. And so I left it in, and then 1994, I think, comes around, or it was maybe 96. I meet a doctor. We've moved to Texas. We've been beaten up, like the way he was saying earlier. We've lost the cabin. We're now in a little condo in San Antonio, which we just happened to own. Otherwise, we would have been on the street. So happened to meet this doctor, and I say to him, and he bristles. I say, I've got this little bump in my ear. And he feels it, and he says, oh, it's a little cyst. You want me to pop it out? I said, yes, I'd appreciate that. So she's pretty pissed off, but she says, okay, one time, we try one time and never again. I'm sure she already knew what would happen. So we go to his office. We've got a video camera there, and it's all on video, the whole thing. He opens it up, and it's a white disc. They both see it, and the nurse sees it. And then suddenly it goes from here down to here. And it's down in my earlobe. And at this point, he knows I've written communion. And he thinks to himself, and you can just see his face is sort of, I might be trying to remove an alien implant here, not a cyst. He says, well, I'd have to take your whole ear off. And he puts a stitch in it, and that's it. 2 days later, my ear starts burning, and it goes back up from here up to here. where it remains to this day. For years, I have no idea what it does. I just leave it there. Every once in a while it turns on, the ear turns bright red. Then Annie passes away. A slit opens up in my eye that I can see against a bright surface, and words are rushing past in the slit. And my writing becomes very much different. The next books, the Afterlife Revolution, A New World, and then Jesus, A New Vision, and then Them, and Fourth Mind, are filled with new ideas. It's a very different, the writing is very different from what it was before. At one point, I'm walking across the street, and the slit is very clear, and it's racing past, and I say, "Who are you?" And it slows down. It looks like typing, being typed very quickly, and it says, "It's me, Anne." Excuse me, but I realized then that we are in the presence, all of us, of a very grand and extraordinary world. And we're here locked up in these bodies to have experiences, novel experiences, in a world that knows itself already very well. And we're here to find the new. That's what we are, a mechanism seeking and discovering the new all the time. Because for every single one of us, every second is always new. That's what we're here for. And I got so involved with the implant, and the visitors were involved, the Grays were involved with the implant too. At one point, I was working on A New World at our family country house in Texas, which I don't own any part of it, but my cousins do. And it's a big old house out in the country where I met the visitors many times when I was a little boy, and I didn't remember it until recently, but I did. Anyway, I would sit in the living room working on A New World. Some of them would be on the porch right outside. It's a great big porch with great big floor-to-ceiling windows. And we would work together telepathically. And it was wonderful fun, such fun. They wouldn't allow any lights to be on, so I would have to go out to this country house without it turning on a single light and kind of creep through. And in any case, it worked well. However, one time, my aunt, she had a few experiences herself, was with me. We were very close for many years. She's in the bedroom upstairs, and there's a sleeping porch up there. And she hears this scuffling sound on the sleeping porch, the scuffling of their scraping feet. And then she hears a voice go, "Why aren't you asleep?" And she calls down to me, "Whitley, was that you?" I said, "No, I didn't hear anything. Are you downstairs?" I said, "Yes, I'm down in the living room." "Well, your friends are here." So I go up and I talk to her, and she says, they want me to go to sleep. How can I go to sleep now? I said, "They have no judgment." So anyway, I thought to myself, and we have a fabulous night of communication that night. But I watched her very carefully the next day, because this is a very stressful thing that happened to her, even though she didn't feel it. And sure enough, she starts to feel, she's in her 80s, the next afternoon she's not feeling well. I take her pulse, she's having a heart attack, clearly. So I call our friend, one of my oldest friends, a doctor, cardiologist who happens to have a country house nearby. I say, "Chris, Jane's having a heart attack, you got to come over here." He comes over, he gets an ambulance, he gets her to the hospital, gets a pacemaker in her, and she was fine for years after that. Stress, extraordinary experiences, writing, amazing, trying to come to the edge of the edge of the edge. That's my life, and that's my writing life now.
Can you, when you say, again, I'm fascinated by the telepathic collaboration.
Yes.
So can you get into more detail about how that
Sure.
works?
Okay, telepathy. It was clear to me for some years that telepathy is the future of all of us. And I had the sense from the Greys that when telepathy began to emerge into the culture as a real thing, it was an important inflection point, and they would be coming closer after that, because they are fluently telepathic. When you're with them, at least in my case, and I know many other close encounter witnesses the same, telepathy's easy. And you think to yourself, I could do this. Then you're not with them anymore, and you can't do it. But a wonderful Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, who is, by the way, this week's guest on my show Dreamland, on my podcast, discovered some years ago that unvoiced people who are neurodivergent tend to also be telepathic. And she proved they were telepathic.
This is the telepathy tapes.
Yes.
Yep.
Then a wonderful, giving, really angelic person, although she's going to beat me up if she hears I said that, Kai Dickens, picked up on this, found out about it, and she specializes in making documentaries about things that are important in the world in ways that we don't usually notice. And she couldn't get the money to make a documentary about these people, but she made a podcast instead called The Telepathy Tapes. And if you haven't listened to the telepathy tapes, as soon as you get home tonight, the first thing you have to do is go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and start listening to the all 10 episodes, because this is one of the great empowerment moments in our history. Because you will find that yes, they're telepathic, and therefore it's possible, and you'll start to discover it in your own life too.
So these kids, they have severe autism.
Severe.
They're nonverbal, and the parents of these children have been told forever, there's no one in there. They're feral animals.
Yeah,
There's
but
no,
they turn out to be wonderful people in there, and a lot of the medical community that services them is very upset about this, because these people have been their cash cow for a long time. Now all of a sudden they're not empty. They're geniuses and they're angels and
they're poets.
And poets. And in fact, I had Kai Dickens on the show a few weeks ago, and she texted one of them who texted back a question, and he texted back, but when he texted back, it was obvious he was telepathically hearing us talking, because he didn't just answer the question, he went into the whole conversation right there. It was fabulous. Anyway, we can do this, and we will learn. We will all learn how to do it. The spellers, they're called, have explained what's necessary. You have to be kind, and you cannot lie. Because if you lie, you've got things to hide. And if you've got things to hide, you can't be telepathic. You can't do it. You're clutching something. But there's another level to this. I've had a lot of telepathy, and I've had telepathy with people that the Greys have sort of created who are telepathic. And you learn very quickly that, yeah, you've got all kinds of stuff that you'd like to hide, but the thing is to just relax and forget about it, because you can't do it when you're telepathic. Everything's going to come out. And at least the hybrids that they've made love it when they find stuff that's really creepy inside you, and they'll go right there every time. And you just get used to it, you know. What have I really got to hide? Annie was right in the first place. I don't have anything to hide. So telepathy is going to come into our world. I have been in the telepathic community of the Greys a few times, and it is the sweetest place you can imagine. And it's the same with the spellers. Their telepathic community is incredibly sweet and deeply at peace with itself. And, we'll all find our way there. We've been at war for a long time with each other in this kind of blind state we live in. We don't have to be here anymore. We're going to go through a very, very difficult time of changes and upheavals over the next few years. And on the other side of it is going to come a new mankind. But that mankind is not going to be full of hatred. It is not going to be full of warfare and violence. That mankind is going to be full of kindness and love and open arms for each other, for the meek will have inherited the earth. That's what's coming.
Well, that's a good note to end on, I think.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna open up the floor to questions. We have time for a few. Do we have a mic that we can bring out? If anyone has questions for Whitley, come on up. Have at it. Hi.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Strieber, for being here. Thank you,
thank
Daniel,
you for
hosting.
coming.
Yeah, your work's been a huge impact in my life. When I was in third grade, I came home, and there was communion on my coffee table, and me, my sisters, all my friends, just freaked us all out.
It's a little scary when someone says to me, when I was in third grade, there was communion on my table. Go ahead, what's the question, if you have one?
But further, yeah, your work's touched my life in a lot of ways. My question is, Bashar, who is a well-known
I know
channeler.
what that is, yeah.
He says the Greys are a future version of us who have come back to basically say, hey, don't mess up. We messed up.
I don't know.
What's your take on that concept? Do you believe that the Greys are future humanity?
I can't answer the question because I don't know. I'm not a believer. Mm-hmm. In other words, I can tell you what I perceive of the Greys, but I've never experienced anything that would suggest that. So I don't know is the answer.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, my name's Tyler, and
Hi.
Whitley, thank you so much for everything you've written. Reading Supernatural, that was the first book I read by you and Jeffrey Kripal, and I can say it was one of the most important things I've ever read in my life. I guess I could call myself an experiencer, and until I read that, I had no framework, language for it that made sense.
Yes.
And it's still obviously very confusing, and it does feel like something is trying to communicate, but I don't really still at all understand. It seems like we're speaking two different languages, and I guess I'm just wondering what you would recommend as far as, it's so destabilizing and it's so exciting.
You're talking about a very profound spiritual experience. It's been called things like the dark night of the soul. And I have a recommendation for you. Be in front of the mystery with your questions. Take your questions to the mystery. Don't look for answers. Look for the energy of the question itself, and it will come to you if you face the mystery that is within you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. My name's Houston. My question, well, I don't have an exact question, but just more curious your thoughts about horror as a genre and about like whether or not we should be recreating kind of like violent and scary things, and if there is horror in this like new world of kindness and no violence, and what your thoughts are
It's
about
a really
that.
good question. And, I created horror in order to master it. And we read horror in order to transform our fear into a form of entertainment. And I'm not so sure the Greys would have come around me at all if I hadn't done that, because they're scary and they're intrinsically scary, and it's not their fault. They are coming to, we are inside the stream of time. Everything for us is always new, and that's why we're here. They are outside the stream of time looking in. And it's not intentional, there's nothing wrong anywhere, but when they come near us, we have to get used to the feeling that we may be drawn out of the stream of time and see our future, which will disempower it and de-energize it. And we're here doing this for that energy. That's why we're here. We're here for the energy of experiencing the new. It's very precious. I go up to Esalen. I'm sure most of you know what the Esalen Institute is, up in Big Sur. And every once in a while there are conferences there, and Jeff Kripal he arranges those conferences, and occasionally there's one that fits this subject, and I'm invited. And when I go there, quite often people want to stay in the same room that I'm in because they think maybe the visitors will show up, which does happen. Jeff went, and he said one time, Jeff said, "I would like to stay in the room with you." And I said, "Fine, do it, but you do know my posse will come. They've been coming every night lately, so it's going to happen." So they came. One of them shows up in the room and wakes me up for the 3 o'clock meditation, and I do the meditation. A little while later, Jeff is confronted with this being, and he perceives it, doesn't see the being, but he experiences this horrendous fear and a sound like glass shattering all around him, and he hears his own voice come from deep within himself go, "Oh my God." And that's because he was being brought by the mere presence of the Grey to the edge of the time stream. This is how a fish feels when he's pulled out of water. And that's where we are right now, by the way. Pisces is the fish swimming in the waters of life, swimming in the womb of the earth. Everything is given to the little fish in the womb. But now the little fish has grown so large that the womb is too full, and the waters are going to break. That's why you see the water carrier pouring out the water in the symbols of Aquarius. The waters of the earth are breaking, and the little fish is going to end up out on dry land. What are we going to do? Jeff had a small version of that experience in that room, but I am living proof that we can do it. Next question. Oh, no, go ahead.
And so you think that being a horror fan better prepares you for that feeling?
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
No question. I tend to be a little prolix, but that's because this is a really complicated thing to deal with.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Hi guys, my name's Ryan. Thank you so much for doing this. You guys both seem like very kind people. I guess this is kind of following through with what was just being talked about a little bit. I hear Stephen Greer and Jake Barber talk a lot about people who are naturally gifted and able to be in communion and have that gift. I haven't had an experience, and I'm curious if there's part of me that wants to, and I'm curious what should go into the preparation if you're seeking that kind of experience? And
Okay.
should we want that?
There's an exercise Anne taught me after she passed away, the significance of it. We did it, we learned it when we were in the Gurdjieff Foundation back in the 70s, and it is a matter of taking your attention to your body, and you can do it methodically by going from foot to lower leg, upper leg, etc., until you've paid attention and gotten a taste of the sensation of your whole body. And you sit with that. That's how the meditation works. And if you're in connection with them, they will come. That's how I work with them at the 3 o'clock meditations. Annie, after she died, we did it for years, not knowing its significance, except that it felt really good. After she died, she explained to me through a mutual friend that she could see me when I was in that state. And I remembered that I asked the visitors once, why did you come? And they said, we saw a glow. And I thought that meant the glow of cities and stuff, because I was still in that headspace. No, it didn't mean that. It meant that I was doing this at 11 o'clock every night in the country house, and they saw this little glow of this exercise being done. So you do it every day, every night for 15 or 20 minutes. Don't try to silence your thought. It's different. You let your thoughts go, and you learn to take your attention to your body so that your mind is open. Now, don't start doing the 3 a.m. meditation, because you'll have sleep issues. That is called Brahma Muhurta time. Look it up. And you will find that is when the mind is most open. But they have to work with you, or you will not be able to live. You'll have real trouble, mental trouble, waking yourself up at that hour. If they start waking you up, then do the meditation then as well. And they will take care of you and make sure that once you go back to sleep, that you will have REM sleep and dreams, and they will make sure your brain cleans itself out. But so this is a start. And it might take you years, and it might never happen. But that doesn't mean it isn't a worthwhile and good thing to do. You have to trust yourself and trust the universe in which you live. And remember this, nothing is lost.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Hey, Whitley and Daniel, my name is John. I have a somewhat complex question, and I'm going to preface it by saying that I'm not an annoying skeptic, so please don't take it like that.
I don't find skeptics annoying. I was good friends with Philip Klass.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, well, it's not coming from that angle regardless.
I find them annoying.
In a sort of Mick West
I just find them wrong, and I find that very pleasant.
Correct. So there's what appears to me to be a fundamental contradiction in the conversation at large right now. And as you mentioned, in telepathy tapes, we get the spellers that are saying, you don't get powers like mine if you lie. And then on the other side, on the UAP issue that is within the past few weeks being pushed forward by career special operators and intelligence officials, wherein deception is just part of your tradecraft. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on how can it be that the U.S. government apparently has psionic programs, and we have, the CIA has wizards or whatever now, wherein you can't have those powers if you lie, but this is coming from intelligence agencies whose, sole or one of their sole competencies is deception. And I'm wondering how we square that.
Okay, you said this. You can't have those powers if you lie. That's very fuzzy. What powers? The answer is that you cannot have a fruitful experience of telepathy unless you're in a loving community. I know that because I live that. As to psionic powers, that's a different story. Being able to project, I can assure you that there are people in the government who can penetrate because I've experienced them. But it's not the same as being part of a telepathic community at all. They cannot see a community like that. They may be able to reach you telepathically, but they're like looking down a tiny corridor, and they're not seeing. They have a narrow beam light is their telepathic ability. It's not the wide, broad community that the spellers experience at all.
I see.
So, but it's a significant issue, because my question is this, and I don't have it answered yet: can they destroy this by their mere attempt to master it and to control it? Can they spill it? Can they break it somehow? And I've been in the telepathy tapes. There's a place called the Hill, right, where they go. The telepathic spellers go and they meet each other. And I've been to the Hill twice. The first time I went to the Hill, it was really a sweet experience. It was very sweet. And I thought, I will go back to the Hill. And I went back to the Hill. And I was very gently told by someone who was like a kind of guardian, don't come back. This is not your Hill. Now, I have my own friends who are working on becoming telepathic, who are not spellers. They're out in the world. And they're like us. And we're making some progress. And we will have our own community. And you can too. We all can. But I'm not so sure that these people who live in a world of violence are going to get very far into that community.
Got it. Thank you, guys.
Hello. Hey, Danielle. Hey, Whitley.
Hi.
I'm Jen. Thank you for tonight. So the first gentleman that asked a question had mentioned seeing communion and at third grade, right?
Yeah.
I am that person that had communion as a third grader. I still have my copy, property of Jennifer Sodini. The cover, to so many that was haunting, for me, was like seeing something familiar, having a sense of homesickness for something I couldn't identify. And my entire life, that cover has been the thing I've searched for. I've watched communion on VHS more times than I can count. I've looked for it in movies and films and in other representation in media. I'm 40 now. I still have yet to find it. What I wanted to ask you is why it seems that in media and in film, beyond communion and maybe close encounters, there's such a determination to pivot the other into this insect, this terrifying, this scary. I mean, some may think that the visitors are scary. For me, I found them beautiful and like the sense of homesickness. So I was just curious your thoughts.
Scary puts fannies in the seats. We love to be entertained by fear. And as far as the Greys are concerned, as I understand it, to them it's fine. It's part of us getting used to them. They think of us as a wild species, and in other words, we're wild and we're not. They're trying to tame us. And part of taming us is us getting, as I said earlier, turning our fear into a form of entertainment. So there's nothing wrong with that. The important thing is that if you don't need that, don't indulge it. In other words, if you're past the fear, don't go to those movies, and it'll stir it all up in you again. But if you find yourself drawn to them, then do it, because that's what you need.
I think I mostly was asking for that search for the familiar, where it's so hard to find that representation.
I'm having some trouble hearing you.
The search for the familiar, where it's so hard to find that in film, for those who find it comforting, to get that. I just think that's interesting. So,
that's very true.
thank you.
Actually, the movie they're going to show here, The Juniper Tree, addresses this whole issue that you just brought up in beautiful ways. So don't come and see that. That'd be wonderful. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jeff. Thanks for coming. It was a great talk tonight. I just had a question. It's a little easier. Do you have any weird stories about ceiling fans?
What?
Ceiling fans.
Ceiling fans.
Like ceiling fans, the spinning.
Ceiling fans?
Yeah.
How odd that you bring that up. No, I'll tell you. It's odd because my wife's main memory of her childhood is of a whirling ceiling fan.
Mine too, yeah. That's why I was interested.
I don't think have I mentioned that? Did you know she
No,
would?
I've just had, there's a lot of talk, with owls, people using owls as sort of like memories to cover experiences.
Yeah, well, owls, yeah. Mike Cleland
ceiling
has
fans
written
are
a
very
lot of interesting books about owls and this experience, and it's a reminder of how profoundly this experience is connected to the depths of nature and our relationship to nature. But go ahead.
Well, like a ceiling fan is to me is kind of an electronic owl. And I wondered if there was any other people who'd experienced the same sort of.
The only
uncanny,
person I know
than
who
your
had
wife.
a similar experience is my wife.
That's good to know. Good
Yeah.
company, I guess. Yeah.
So
Thank
can you say more about your ceiling fan?
No, I just have a lot of memories of gazing up at ceiling fans, and they felt to me very odd and sort of uncanny. Not a sense of movement in a still area, and a sense of displacing air, and the feeling of things happening that you're only sort of vaguely aware of. And to me, that's connected with a lot of personal experiences, things that I remember happening in my childhood that are a little vague. And the ceiling fan comes up a lot in when I think of those times, those experiences. So I was wondering if there was other people that had the same thing.
Is there anyone else here that has that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. This
Amazing.
is great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ceiling fan people.
Yeah, we're here. We're out here. We're out here.
What you need to do is to find all of the people who put out streetlights when they walk under them, and you can get together and have a convention and see what happens.
I know a couple of those guys, so we'll work on it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you both for tonight. My name is Laura, and I suppose my question is more of a worldview question. You talked about different episodes of synchronicities or absurdities or charged narrative moments in life, maybe some sort of precognitive. And I guess I'm curious to know if you see those experiences as being organized by your friends, or if reality and consciousness itself is agentive, or if it's something in between.
I'm not sure that I have a clear answer to that question. I think I've gotten the impression from time to time that the Greys or someone on that level is threading things together in my life on purpose. Other times it seems that there is something to do with noticing the weave of experience in a different way. So I think it may be, in a sense, part of both.
Thank you.
You're the last one, make it good.
Thanks, no pressure. Thank you very much, both very much for being here. Mr. Strieber, I've been an admirer of your work for a long time.
Thank you.
Communion was so inspirational to me. And I noticed a couple synchronicities when other people were asking questions as well. Another big influence on me was the filmmaker David Lynch, who sadly passed away recently. The owls are not what they seem from Twin Peaks just made me think of the owl thing. The ceiling fans actually is a big part of that. And he would always talk about transcendental meditation to get his ideas. And he'd be like, you got to catch the big fish. He would say stuff like that, right? And so that was his idea of diving deep internally. And I started thinking about that when you were talking about how these beings might not be extraterrestrial, but there might be inner beings, or I believe that something...
Inward beings.
Inward beings, right.
Yeah.
And so kind of dovetailing back what my friend John was asking earlier, there is this sort of interesting idea with people like John Keel who have talked about how there are these expressions of paranormal entities that could be constructed to take us away from what those inward beings are actually. And so someone like David Lynch, I wonder, like, he must have been experiencing, he felt like seemingly at peace at all times, even though stuff he was imagining was deeply weird and disturbing in ways that I like, but it's, kind of uncanny. In the same way that I think your description of the little doctors in the book, and the owls all really creeped me out, but I was still fascinated by it and wanted to know more, even though perhaps I shouldn't have been. But that fear did inspire me to investigate it. So, trying to wrap this up in a coherent way, I wonder if you have some of these experiences, how does one know that one is experiencing that true inward being, or if there are these external forces that are showing you an illusion of that, because there might be forces that are attempting to draw you away from what the reality is?
You will not know.
Okay, well.
You have to live with the question.
Got it.
And that is the only way to do it. If you try to nail it down, it's just going to slip out from it will slip away from you. Living with the question is the energetic thing to do, and it's tremendously energizing to face a question like that and make it part of your life. Live your question. And that's certainly how most of the experiencers I know who are making progress with this are doing it. This is because they live the question. And then there are the ones who concretize it, and suddenly the next thing you know, they're telling you that, well, the world's going to end on December the 17th, 2021, or Jesus is going to return on Easter Sunday, 2026, or whatever they're saying. And it ain't going to, that's not how it is. It's much, it will suck you in and spit you out if you let it. But you keep to the question, and the energy keeps coming to you. And that's what it actually wants. A new world, if we can take it. We have to be strong.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think we're going to be doing book signing now, and I'd like to thank everyone for the wonderful questions and the joyous evening.
Thank you, Whitley.